welcome to Let's Have a Go. Thank you for joining me. So we're going to kick off the first of our real standard format episodes, and the one that I've decided to kick off with, the craft that we'll start with, is knitting, in case you haven't picked up on all of the very subtle clues. So knitting I've been doing for a little while, maybe for a couple of years. I'm not super experienced, but I have a little bit of a knowledge of it, but maybe not far enough ahead that you can't catch up and we can start to learn together. So what we're going to do, with that being the case, is we're going to start off by maybe learning a few of the basics in this video, and I'll show you what I've picked up and help you to be able to pick up the needles as well. And then in the next video, what we'll do is we'll review some of the mistakes that I've made along the way in that short time that I've been knitting, and maybe some tips that will help you to get started. And then after that, we'll just have a few general comments and thoughts on what knitting is about, what really it means to me, and then we can go from there. Maybe a few more projects in the future. So without further ado, let's have a go. So the good news is that starting with knitting, you don't need very much to start at all. You only need a few things, just some yarn. You may have seen some yarn in different shops. I would start off with some cheap yarn. Don't start too expensive. Just pick up one ball, and then you can go from there. There's lots of different types and different thicknesses and colours. Choose whichever one you feel most comfortable with. I will say though that starting with something that is a little bit thicker will give you the progress as you knit. You progress a lot quicker, so you see a lot of progress as a beginner very quickly, so that's quite nice to see. And also what you'll need is some needles as well, which you can pick up in a variety of shops as well, sometimes in charity shops as well. But a little tip with these ones is that when you're going to a charity shop, they sometimes might not have them out on display because they're sometimes viewed as sharp objects that are maybe viewed as weapons. So maybe ask about what's behind the desk and they might be able to find some for you. But that's all you really need to start, and you are ready to go. So we'll start on our first few stitches. So to begin with, before we actually start knitting, we need to create what is called a slip knot. And to do that, it's very simple. There are a few methods that you can utilise, but I've got one that I've used for a little bit now, and it's fairly foolproof. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with a little tail. So we're going to start with about 10 to 15 centimetres, so around about here. And you just pinch that with your thumb and your middle finger, and then what you do is you just wrap the working yarn, that's what this bit is, the bit attached to the yarn. You're going to wrap that around your finger twice, and then you pinch that within the middle and thumb as well. Then what you do is you move this loop over to that one. There we are, so we've just got them overlapping, and then you just do that again, one loop over the other and off the end of your finger. And then you just pull, and you should have a little loop there that you can start to pull and tighten. So once you've done that, just put that onto your needle and pull, not too tight, just tight enough to be able to have it on there. If you have it too tight, it might be a bit difficult for when you're starting out a little bit later. But now that we've got the slip knot, we can now move on to the next section, which is casting on. So casting on is fairly straightforward. Again, there's lots of different methods that you can use when casting on. The one that I'm going to show you is fairly simple, but please be aware that there are different types for different maybe finishes to the end of your knitting, or maybe different types of cast on to have the material stretch in different ways, and some of them require a different length of tail, so just be sure to research the cast on method if you see that in any instructions that you use. But this one, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a loop, and then you just thread that loop onto the end of the needle. So you take the working yarn, you just create a loop, and then you put that onto the needle, and again you can bring them on, but we're not going to pull them too tight this time, just so that we can work with the knitting. And then you just go for it a number of times. Now when you're knitting with a pattern, what they'll most probably tell you is how many you need to cast on, and that number usually includes the slip knot as well. So if we continue on, let's say that we needed to do 7, so we've got, at the moment here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just 2 more, just creating that loop and just going over there, and there we have it. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those stitches are now cast on there, ready to go. Now that we've got that base layer, we can begin to work with the stitches. So we're going to first of all look at the knit stitch. Now this is probably the most famous of all the stitches, I would say. You've most probably heard of knit and purl. But if you haven't, this is one of 2 major stitches that you build your base of other skills, other parts of the knitting are based upon the knit stitch and the purl stitch. They're mainly variations of those. So it's good to get a good knowledge of the basics so that you can start off with. So we'll put our ball of yarn over here and we'll get our needle. So we have our empty needle in our right hand, and we have the one that we've got our stitches on in our left hand. So just pull them to the end of the needle there. And then what you do is you make sure to get the working yarn that is attached to the yarn, the ball of yarn, and you just hold it in your right hand, and then make sure to hold it behind the needle. You see how it's behind the needle there, behind the left hand needle? See, that is very important for the knit stitch. Then what you do is you actually insert the needle into the loop from underneath. There, so we've inserted it from underneath, and then the right hand needle goes behind the left hand needle. So then what you can do is you can wrap the yarn around the right hand needle and pull it through, back through and off the end of the needle. And that is the first of the knit stitches created. So I'll just do that again, making sure that the yarn is behind the needle. So it's behind it there, and then you just put the needle in so that it goes through and behind the left hand needle. You wrap it around the right hand needle, you pull back through with the right hand needle, and then you make sure to pick up that bit that you wrapped around it, and you go off of the end of the left hand needle. So I'll just knit a few more stitches just so we get to the end of the row. And there we are, we've created a row of knit stitches. Now you won't actually see much progress at this point in time, but once you start to knit a few rows you can start to see the actual progress beginning. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go on to the purl stitch. So as you can see, I've progressed the knitting just a little bit so that we can see 2 techniques within one section. I've done just a few more rows and you can start to see the pattern begin. Within here, that well-known knitting pattern that you've most probably seen on some of your garments that you have. So we're going to show you the purl stitch. I've just done a knit row on that side. Now I'm just going to show you the purl. Now the purl stitch is very much like the knit stitch, but just in reverse. So what we'll need to do is to start off with, we get the working yarn, the yarn that's connected to the ball of yarn here, and with this one, with the reverse of the knit stitch, you have it facing in front of the left hand needle. So you can see that there, that working yarn is in front of the left hand needle. Then what you do is you get the right hand needle in this hand, and you'll see that I've got the yarn wrapped around my hand. I did that for both the knit stitch and the purl stitch. Now this is just so that you can keep the tension on this section here of that yarn. When you do that, you actually create neater knitting. So you want to make sure that it's nice and you keep the tension as you're knitting. Now I use a technique which isn't really that standard. There is a method that has it wrapped around your finger there. Now I just don't find that as comfortable, so some people do it in different ways. Whichever way feels most comfortable to you, I would say is the best way for you, as long as you keep that tension on that yarn there. So I'll just do that there. Then, so we've got our yarn in front of it, and what we do is, instead of inserting it from underneath, we're just going to insert the needle into that loop on the top of it there. So we insert it, and you'll notice that the right hand needle, instead of going behind the left hand needle, it goes in front of the left hand needle. So there, we've got it there, and then what you do is you wrap it around much like you would for the knit stitch, and then you just pull it back out, pick up that bit of yarn that you wrapped around, and then pull it off the end. So we'll do that again. You insert the needle through the top so that it goes in front of the left hand needle, and then wrap it round, pull it back, pick up that yarn and back off the end. Through in front, wrap it round, pull it back through, off the end. Just continue to go. But once you've done that, you'll have another row, and then you'll notice that the yarn starts to naturally fall behind, so you're ready to do another knit stitch row. So that's what you'll usually find, is that you'll do a knit row, then a purl row, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. You might have heard that saying before, or that phrasing. And so now here we are, we're ready on a knit stitch row, and I'll show you how to cast off. So with the casting off, you've got the ability to finish off the work. Now we can do this in a very standard format. Usually do it on a knit row. It's much more easier if you do it on a knit row than a purl row, but you can do it on a purl row. So what you simply do is that you go in as if you're going to knit. So we're on a knit row here. So you knit a stitch, and then you do that again. But then what you do at this point, with 2 stitches on this needle, you then get that first one that you knitted, and then you take it off the end. And then this is a pattern that you follow through the whole row. So we just knit another one, make sure that you have 2 stitches on the needle, you insert your left needle back through the first of those stitches, and then you pull it off the end. And again, knit it, insert your left hand needle back into here and off the end. Oh, nearly lost all of the knitting. That can be a risk here, so be careful as you bring both those stitches to the very end of that right hand needle. Just be careful not to take them all off. And there we are, we're left with one more stitch on the needle. So you can't cast off anymore because you can't knit another one to go onto the right hand needle. So at this point what we do is we cut off we cut off the remainder of this. So I'll just get some scissors and we just cut the remainder of the yarn, leave a little tail on it, and then what you can do is you can take it off of the needle very carefully, maybe make that loop just a little bit bigger, and then you thread the yarn through that loop that you've just created. You take it through there and then you pull tight, and there we are. We have a bit of knitting, those two tails there, but now it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to unravel. You've got those loops there. So at this point, once you've finished that, you can start to weave these tails back in to your knitting, the work that you've just done, so that it almost disappears. If we didn't leave those tails that we had here, so this tail at the beginning when you cast on and this tail when you cast off, you'd just be left with these weird little bits at the end, and they don't make your work look very good. So you can just sew them back in, follow the pattern of the knitting, and they almost disappear. So there we have it. We've created our first bit of knitting. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that was informative and made you want to pick up the needles. I really would encourage you to have a go, and to watch some other videos as well. Other people's techniques sometimes maybe click with you a little bit more. I'm by no means the font of all knowledge. I make many mistakes, as you could most probably see. I struggle on a few little points there. It can be a little bit tough sometimes, but really do have a go. And before you do that, if you could like, comment on the video and subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you're up to date with all the updates that I bring out, and join me next time on Let's Have a Go.